Hi, everybody. Welcome along to episode 90 of Percussion Discussion. As usual, I'm going to ask you to please check out our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, our world famous YouTube channel. Here you can find all of our conversations, past and present. If you could find 2 minutes to subscribe, it really helps us grow. And it also means that you don't miss any of the upcoming interviews, which there are plenty of really good ones as well. If you'd rather listen on the go, then the great news is all of our conversations are available in podcast form. These are free to stream or download from your favorite podcast provider, Spotify, etc., etc. On to today's guest, an amazing, and I mean an amazing drummer, amazing British drummer. And he's one of those drummers that has an instantly recognizable sound. He really has his own unique thumbprint. He's played for people like The Cult, Roger Daltrey, Pete Townshend, Nik Kershaw. He's played for plenty of people, but he's probably best known to be the powerhouse drummer behind the British rockers' Big Country. It gives me remarkable pleasure to welcome the wonderful Mr. Mark Brzezicki. So, Mark, thanks so much for doing this, mate. Really appreciate it.
Very welcome, Matty. Great to be here.
Well, it's lovely to have you here, and I've been an admirer of your playing for many years, so it's great to finally get you here.
Very kind, thank you.
No problems. So I guess the best place to start is at the beginning. Where did music catch fire for you? What's your first memories of music?
Well, I've got two brothers and two sisters, so I'm from a large family. And my father, as well as being he was a Polish aircraft engineer. He was a Merlin engine specialist. Came in from the Polish Air Force at the latter part of the war. Ended up in Northolt Aerodrome, which isn't far from my house here in Langley. Met my mum. Stayed after the war. And they were all recruiting for this new airport that was opening called London Airport. It wasn't called Heathrow then. So he went straight to BOAC, which became British Airways, worked there all his life. But he was also an opera singer, my dad. He practiced his scales every day. We had a piano at home. He released a few records as well, my dad, singing Italian opera. He was a tenor. That's Christ, it was his voice. He had a lovely voice, very musical. So he would play all the opera stuff, including like Hungarian gypsy music, all that kind of Eastern European stuff. While my mum on the dance set was playing things like Billy Fury and everything from the 60s onwards, really, the Beatles to, there was a very, very different mix between my mum and my dad. So, and we had a piano, so I was always tinkering on the piano. I don't claim to play the piano, but I've got good musical sensibility of chord structure and how things work with the root note and all that stuff. So musical family. My older brother bought a guitar, electric guitar. Went across the road to a friend who had a little drum kit. I think it was called a Gigster kit, which I remember. My younger brother, who's 2 years younger, got an older brother 2 years older, younger brother 2 years younger. Tony, my older brother. Steve, my younger brother, who ended up playing bass on many records with me over the years. Great bass player. I went across the road to see what they were up to, and the guy playing this little drum kit nobody was really playing good at that time, but I had a little go on it, and it really fired me up. I think the first thing that fired me up was that I actually physically was excited by the look of the drums, because I'd only ever saw them on television, and when I saw them, I'd never seen a drum kit close up. When I was 6 years old, I hadn't seen one. Most people didn't. There was no drum shops around at that time. It was hard. You had to go into London to see that stuff. They were always on the television. So when I saw one in real life, it's very exciting. Oh wow, this is what they actually look like. I always liken it. It's a silly analogy because I'm a bit of a plane buff as well. I did do an aircraft apprenticeship as an aircraft engineer for 6 years, playing in bands before I went totally professional. So I had the same excitement on the drums as the first time I saw an aeroplane, because you only ever see them this small in the air. I like seeing the drums on the TV. And then when you see them in real life as a kid, the size of them and stuff, you get that excitement. And I had exactly the same excitement. It's a strange analogy, but it's true. Physically looking at those drums. And I love the sound they made. It was a cheap old kit, single-headed tom, no floor tom. And I ended up buying it off a guy called Peter McElvenny. and paying for it with my paper route money at the time.
It's hard to imagine, isn't it, these days that
Yeah,
you've never seen a drum kit in real life. I mean,
no,
everything's at your fingertips now, and you can see
yeah.
people in shops, and it's a lovely thing to say, isn't it, that you've never seen one in real life, and all of a sudden there it was.
It was so amazing because all the music I'd been hearing on the dance set, very eclectic, as I said, from the sort of 50s and 60s music, which my mum was playing. And to hear the drums that sounded a little bit like they were on the records, and you tap the snare and it had that sound, and the bass, it was very exciting. And I emulated some of the records that I'd heard. Crazy as they sound, I mean, the first thing I learned to play was the Monster Mash, because the drums are very, very loud in that track. If you actually play that, it has the classic 1960s double snare, boom, jack, jack, boom, jack, boom, jack, jack, simple drum fills. But you could hear the tuning of the tom-toms, because they were tuned more jazzy, a lot higher tuned. And I could play that very easily. And immediately I used to put that record on and run upstairs to my bedroom and put a big towel over big blanket over the drum kit and play to that record. And then it got better as the music progressed, and I was learning more and more songs. I always remember, what was the song? Dizzy. Dizzy had a good little drum break in it. Bump, stat, stidum, bump, bat, stidum, bump, bat. So I learnt that. And then it went from there to wanting to learn music that had a lot of great drumming. And my older brother was buying, because 2 years older, he had the money because he had the first job. So he was buying Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Bowie. And then when I got a little bit of money, I met other musicians, because I was just looking. I'm self-taught, so I just went to watch drummers in local clubs and pubs, sat there and got to know the guys, and sat in, and even if I was not that great, which apparently I was pretty good early on, but I used to try and sit in and get my, just have a go at doing these rock and roll stuff, and just practicing all the time. So, I then bought myself an old van. It was a 1966 London Borough of Hillingdon ex-motorway maintenance vehicle, and it had black and yellow stripes on the back, and I could park it anywhere and not get it sticking up the something. I used to carry a little traffic cone, put it in front of my van, and hopefully not get a ticket. I used to practice in my van on the Holmbrook Pie Pass, which is a road. It's a road where nobody walks down, because it's like a road where lorries trundle down there, and there's a lay-by where lorries pull up for the evening. There's nobody there. So I used to pull up in the evening away from the lorries, put my soundproof headphones on in my van, tiny little kit, one rack tom, dare I say, and put my cassette on, climb over the driver's seat, go back into the back of the van, put my soundproof headphones on, and play some of the tracks. But by this time, I was listening to Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow. I got into anything that didn't have vocals. Not that I don't like vocals. I think they have a great part in being rhythmical when I'm doing sessions, and I like to know the story. But learning the drums, you want to hear drummers that play great. For me, I tapped into all the American drummers, well as I've been always said that my biggest influence was Phil Collins with Brand X.
Yeah,
it led to very quickly. I've told the story before, but I had a chance of going to see a band called Boxer, which I'd never heard of, but it was going to be my first real live gig, not one down the pub, not down at the British Legion, not down at the Workingmen's Club, although I've been playing in other bands by now, that stuff. I went to see my first real band. It was at the Roundhouse, and Phil Collins came on in his boiler suit, with I say boiler suit, dungarees.
Yeah,
had a beard. It was that era. He had a big beard. Didn't know who he was. He came out with a bucket of paint, which was his thing, because I think his wife ran off with a decorator or something like that. The story goes. But his kit was side onto the stage, and when he played, that was it. It was all over for me. That was I played that album, all the Brand X stuff, to death, and I still rehearse with it. I still put Unorthodox Behaviour on. Still my favourite drum sound. Still my favourite drumming. Billy Cobham, Spectrum, all those areas that I tapped into. But I like the session guys as well. So I'm doing a lot of waffling here. I really session like Steve Gadd. I like players that had feel, particularly hi-hat players and grace note players like Steve Gadd, Harvey Mason, Rod Moregenstein. I used to love in Dixie Dregs. I used to listen to all those bands. I still do. And then my kind of Bible, Richard Bailey on Blow by Blow was extraordinary drumming, very clear, fantastic drumming. And I just learned and played to those records, as well as playing the covers in the evening when I was doing my apprenticeship. I was in a band that had two blind guys in the band who were incredible musicians. And they sort of taught me to play the same speed, but very quiet at a dinner dance, or a lot louder when they were having a dance, and you could be as loud as you want without speeding up. All that stuff, they had me rooted, you know. So, and but by that time, I was doing TV ads and jingles and drumming for different artists in a studio called Hallmark Studios in Forbert Street in West One, with a guy called Steve Hall, who was a fantastic musician and got me on a lot of TV ads and TV programs, kids programs and stuff, where I would do the theme music.
Sure. Did you? I mean, you've had a proper musical education, a proper old school. Was it always in the back of your mind that this is gonna be work for me? This is what I'm gonna do. Was that always the mindset?
I think it was a wish to be. After I saw Phil Collins, I wanted to be on stage playing that kind of music in those sort of venues with that kind of drum sound. You know, I just wanted to be like that. But I didn't make any plans. You know, my father was very much, because he was an aircraft engineer. I followed in his footsteps. I did 6 years at British Aerospace in Weybridge at Brooklands, aircraft engines and airframe. And my father was insisting that I passed my apprenticeship, and it wasn't a wasted time, something to fall back on, all those things, which I wasn't that keen on. Well, I was, but in the evening, I was desperately leaving work and trying to get to the gigs without being late, and coming late back into work. You know, I always struggled to make 8 o'clock in the morning for back at my apprenticeship, because I'd been out till 4 playing the drum.
Oh, I mean, that's a perfect story to me.
Yeah. I'll let you ask me questions anyway.
No, it's fine. It's lovely to hear. I mean, that upbringing and that musical education, I think it is like the textbook. It's what people would want to hear as well. I know that was the way it was, but and I mean, your drumming style is kind of it's progressive, I guess you'd say. It's not your regular 4 on the floor, go to sleep sort of thing, you know.
You know what it is? I was really influenced by those jazz fusion and prog rock drummers, you know. Because it was interesting drum-wise, and it still is. You know, if you want to stretch your learning, go in that area. You know, I found the easy stuff to play was the rock and roll stuff. You know, the basic rock stuff. I found, in fact, I answered an advert in the Melody Maker because I was doing the covers on those working men's clubs dates that I talked about, and I answered an advert that said Phil Collins style Bill Bruford needed in the back pages of the Melody Maker. So I went to the audition, which was at Shepperton Film Studios. And I'd already knew the songs. It was incredibly complicated because a guy called Gary Stevenson, who ended up producing Go West and all kinds of other people, he's done Tony Hadley's new album. I've done lots of session work with him, and he's produced albums for me. He was a guitar player I met in the rehearsal room, and he gave me this cassette and said, "Listen to this, you'll like this. The drumming's great." I had no idea that the audition I was going to was the music I was rehearsing in the back of my transit van.
Wow.
In 9/8 and 5/4, nothing was in 4/4. Nothing was. So I thought, incredible band. I wasn't really sure who they were because it was an unmarked cassette. When I got to the audition, I went, "Oh my God, that's the music playing that I rehearsed with," and I could hear them all train crashing in the first 4 bars because it was a 9/8, you know. So I was desperate to play it, but a guy came out. His name was Tony Butler, who became Big Country's bass player.
Yeah.
Came out, and I hadn't realised that the guy auditioning was Simon Townsend, Pete Townsend's brother. And it was a prog rock band, a 5-piece prog rock band, incredible band. You know, they were young teenagers. You know, Simon was 15, I think, and I think I was 18 or 19. So I was desperate to play, but then Tony said to me, "Thank you for turning up. We've got enough drummers that have come down. Nobody can play the songs; they're too complicated. But we've earmarked a couple of drummers. Sorry, we've had too many people apply." So I was like, "Oh my God, no! You need to." I didn't want to say no to the stuff. I thought, no, I can play this stuff. You know? So Simon Townsend came out. I didn't know who he was at the time, and said, "No, come on, give him a shot. He's been out here for 5 hours." So I even knew the songs even more. Just sat there tapping on the steering wheel, you know. And I went in there and played everything stick perfect because I'd already rehearsed for months on those very records.
Amazing
Gig. I got the gig with as a 5-piece prog rock band. Brilliant music, I've got to say. It was we were like Rush as teenagers. It was very music, but amazing. We used to play the Red Line in Brentford. In Fulham. On a Thursday night or Friday night for about 2 years doing that stuff. I know the Genesis Road crew used to come and see us play there. We had a bit of a following. And then, if I may continue waffling, whilst I was now working with Simon, I had a call one day from Pete Townshend, while at Simon's house. He spoke to Simon and said, "Mark, my big brother's on the phone. He's doing a record. Simon Phillips can't do the session for his album Empty Glass. Come down to Wessex Studios. We've got Bill Price and Chris Thomas producing, who did the Sex Pistols and all those people." And I met those guys and Pete, of course, and I've worked with Pete ever since on his records. I'm working with him kind of on the moment. It's ongoing for his new record. So yeah, everything changed with that because we then went from, again, I do apologise. It's easier to just get punk rock broke, which I didn't really appreciate. I appreciated it after the event because I like the energy and I like what spurned from these bands that were claiming to be punk rock but weren't, like Police. They had to be bracketed to somewhere, but they were not punk at all. So I loved the Police. I enjoyed the Jam as well. I like the energy of that. We went from a 5-piece prog rock band to a 3-piece power pop band with me, Simon Townsend, and Tony Butler. Me and Tony ended up doing session work for Pete Townshend. We did one show at Brockwell Park in 1981 where the manager for the Skids, which was Stuart Adamson's band, said he was looking for a young rhythm section to complete the lineup of this new band, Big Country. And they had a record deal in the pipeline, but were not happy until they found a proper lineup. They weren't happy with the way the demos were sounding. The playing wasn't up to standard. So when we went down to Phonogram Records, me and Tony, they already knew who we were to a degree because we'd already worked with Pete on this album. I think Tony had worked with the Pretenders. I'd done all this other stuff, particularly TV ads and jingles and theme music for programs. So yeah, we got the gigs.
Easy decision for them then.
Huh?
An easy decision for them.
Yeah. It was instant. They just said, "We'll sign the band." You know, that was it. We Big Country got a record deal, like a 5-album deal, which they were giving at those times. They signed your career rather than throw something at the wall and see if it sticks and you get dropped. You know, they gave you a career basically, and to see you develop musically. Yeah. So yeah, that's how I got into Big Country. So at the right place at the right time, through coincidences, but we're determined to do stuff. So
well. You say right place at the right time, which it is, but you've also got to have the ability to back it up, haven't you? And you've obviously got that in spades.
You talked about my style. I don't know what my style is, if I'm really honest. I was always influenced by fusion and prog rock drummers. I like the energy of punk. So when I came into Big Country, I turned on something that was already there because I love the Steve Gadd approach. If you listen to 50 Ways, that kind of slight military thing. I must add that before I was actually a kit drummer, well, I was a kit drummer because I had that little drum kit from across the road. My father had given me, he said, "You may be interested in learning proper drumming." And he gave me this RAF book of rudiments of military drumming. So I sat and played my rudiments and tried to apply them onto the kit as I was starting up. So I learnt my rudiments, basic ones, really early through my dad pushing me to try and do it right. So as soon as I heard Big Country's music, I thought, blimey, it does sound, I wasn't allowed to say the years later, I mean, you can say, but, you know, it sounded like bagpipes. I'm a southerner. It did sound like bagpipes. You know, brilliant twin guitars, a little bit like Thin Lizzy. It had a great, absolutely beautiful, unique guitar sound. I've never heard anything like it. And for that reason, I wasn't sure if it was actually going to do anything because it was so different. So I thought, well, the demos that, you know, they had a few demos, and everything, all the demos they played, Bruce the guitarist and Stuart Adamson the guitarist, they coupled together to play the drums. And every drum kit they played was Bruce played the floor tom and Stuart banged the snare all the time, and that was the drum track. So every song went do do da do 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 da do do. So in a way, I thought, well, actually, I'm going to hit the floor tom. It's not something I would normally do. So I kind of channeled my. I liked XTC at that era. You know, I thought making plans for Nigel, that kind of drumming was really great. So I thought I could go down that road, hitting the floor toms. They wanted it to be, you know, they came out of the punk thing with the new wave. I thought I've got to try and be in tune to that, but also bring a little bit of what I want to bring in. So I kind of brought complicated punk drumming or ex-punk drumming into the band, but with a bit of Steve Gadd as well, you know, because I thought the military stuff would really work with the bagpipey sound and kind of get this charging, marching thing with a rock feel behind it. So I thought, well, nobody's done that really. So, and I found it easy to do.
You have that explains a lot now that you've mentioned about the military, you know, the RAF book. But I've noticed, as well as the rudiments, and there's not many drummers that do this. To my mind, you see the drum kit as a whole, not that, right, I play the groove with the bass, snare, and hi-hats, and then the toms are just for the odd fill. You seem to see the whole thing as I can use that.
I played them. You see, when you play on your own, which is what I did all the time I was learning, I only had one rack tom as a rack tom was a rack. It was that Gigster kit. I never had a floor tom. I made one out of cardboard, corrugated cardboard. Made a kind of like a circular thing. Gaffer taped a drum skin to give it rigidity. Coat hanger leg, so I could at least slap something. So I wanted more tom-toms, and all the music I was hearing from Billy Connell onwards all had these kind of all the way down the drums. If you listen to the 70s drums, you look at anything from the 70s, they had lots of tom-toms. It was never the single rack tom on a snare stand. That was I never came from that school. So I wanted lots of toms. I liked the way the kit looked, and they were all different colours. To me, you could play tunes on those drums. Yeah. So I would emulate bass. So I sit and play on my own. You know, if you're going really simple rhythm, boom, that, boom, boom, I'll go to the toms, boom, 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 tom, floor tom, first rack, second floor. I make notes on the drums like I'm playing lines whilst I'm playing the kit. And I found I enjoyed that aspect of having more things around me rather than limiting it to the flat, you know. And I found I could do one thing that really influenced me was a drummer called Mike Clark with Herbie Hancock on an album called Rust. And he had a fantastic way, I mean, incredible hi-hat player and kind of funky, almost you could call them. I used to love watching American TV cop programs because the drumming, incidental drumming, was always hi-hat led, and you know when there's a car chase, you had the hi-hat and the single-headed tom fills. I loved all that stuff. But Mike Clark played 2-bar grooves that nobody else was doing. You know, on thrust, instead of it just being 1, 2, 3, 4, and you start again. He played over 2 bars, so you can make a little pattern out of it. Nobody was doing that over here. I thought, I'm going to do patterns of 2 bars. So I could go tom, da, dum, dum, da, dum, da, and back again, and then copy it again. Yeah. And that's now the drum groove. And I got that from Mike Clark because he had that. I don't know if you know the track, Matty, but he had the track called Thrust.
I don't.
Brilliant about that. It's displaced 4s. He just plays late and catches up with himself. But it's over 2 bars. Yeah. And I that approach, but I've used that on a few tracks actually. And it goes 1, 2, 3, bump that, sugar digga that, gum gum that, that bump that, sugar digga that, gum gum that, that one, that sugar digga that, gum gum that, that bump that. It goes over 2 bars.
You need a really confident bass player to do that with.
Yeah. Sounds like you kicked the record, but it's very clever because you haven't. It's just in 4/4, and I love that drumming where you can add stuff and put a little bit of flavour to something that could be pretty mundane. And when you heard the demos of Big Country, because musically it was fantastic, you know, it had guitars that sounded like violins, it had guitars that sounded like marimbas, they sounded like bagpipes, they sounded like guitars at times. I thought, well, I'm make the drum sound approach a little bit more interesting. 2 hi-hats very early on, second snare from the start, so you get the offbeat on the second snare. I got the gong drum in really early through watching Billy Cobham and in the early 80s and stuff. And yeah, I just saw them as part of the orchestra, you know, lots of different things. And it makes me play more inventive because I've got more things to play with.
Sure. And
I do a hell of a lot on the small kit, and I'm not taking that away. And I do appreciate seeing that. But, and I can do that to a degree, you know, but I found for my creativity, I do like the, you know, I used to use 4 rack toms at the front and 2 floor, but space in the van and economics and stuff, I use 3 rack toms and 1 floor, sometimes 2. So I do like having my toms.
do you have the octobans still?
The octobans, yeah, I've always liked the octobans. I got them in as soon as they came out. I bought 8 of them and used to have them set up. And oh God, they're ridiculous to take out. So I used to take 4 out with Big Country in the early days, and then again, it's, you know, we're playing week in, week out with a different sound engineer, and sometimes they don't have the amount of mics. You know, we turn up and go, oh my goodness me, you know, you've got 10 drums, 11 drums. So I've had to be kind of economical with my drum kit at the moment. But when I do sessions, I take out the bigger kit, or if I do the Prince's Trust or things like that, which I've been very privileged to do, I take out the bigger kit when I can. So yeah.
I think people like to see you with the bigger kit because it's you, isn't it? I remember in the 80s and I'd see adverts for Pearl and what have you, and your kit always looked like one you'd want to sit behind and have some fun. It'd be like,
well, you know, I still got a few 1970s catalogs because I love the way the drums were made in the 70s. I mean, they're made great now, but I think there's too much nonsense involved with them, to be honest with you. I think all the dampening stuff is absolute nonsense. But personally, I take all the dampening suspension stuff off. It makes no sense at all to me. I can't tolerate drums that don't have a bracket on the bass drum, because nightmare to get the toms right. You're dealing with getting your cymbals right and your toms with a reach that's going to, you know, the further your arm reaches, the more movement there is. And you're on the drum riser and there's all that movement, and my tom-toms are doing this. You know, I sometimes have to shut my eyes because it makes me feel giddy. But I'm old school with the drums. You know, you can't reinvent the board. It's always going to be round. The drums, I think they go through fashionable phases, which I understand because I was influenced by the catalogues in the 70s. They always had lots of toms, lots of concert toms. One of my new kits is already a concert tom kit, which I'll be playing at some point. I've had that for a few years. I like double-headed drums for the tone you get on the lower end stuff.
Yeah.
But generally 8, 10, 12, 13, I like single-headed. And then 14, 16, you can have double-headed floors. I like the low end you get with the floor tom with pins. I like the attack you get with single heads. As well as session work, I'll take in double heads because you get that very gaddy sound, you know, that very tuneful tom-tom sound. So, yeah, I guess the catalogues, when I was growing up, you open the catalogue and you see all those drums and all the cymbal stands. That excited me, and I wanted a kit like that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, you know what? I was looking at. Just bear me 1 second. Hang on. I was looking at this. This might interest you. Where was it? I actually saw this. I found it in my drum room. Don't know if you had that one.
Yeah, is that the Pearl one?
It is the Pearl one. Yeah.
Yeah.
With all the.
Yeah.
And that's a 70s one for you. Look at that.
You know, as a kid, it's a little bit like when you get albums, you know, albums rather than CDs, or now it's the downloads. It was the album sleeve that you used to get and open it up and look at all the pictures. I used to always look at what gear they've got, you know, what's the drum. In fact, I used to do that when there was, I think we had an advert for Butlins or something sent to us. And I was intrigued by looking through the brochure. Now, it's a tiny picture of a drummer on stage in Butlins and wonder what kit it was, what colour it was, how many times. All those things used to really interest me.
I don't think you ever grow out of that, though. I don't.
No, I think what I was saying earlier about drums, I think they're beautifully made, and I think you've got to try and reinvent stuff. but I don't know how they can really, because it's an acoustic instrument. It either works great and you keep adding more things and it detracts. What I don't like is adding too many things to the shell.
Yeah.
And for me, I like the squarer sizes for drums. They're very shallow at the moment, which is fine, but I notice a difference. I mean, I had the Custom Z back in the day, which was square sizes. That's probably my best drum kit I've ever played, ever. Yeah. It sounded great in any environment I went in. And the theory I come up with is I had no dampening on there either. I say dampening, I had no suspension.
Yes.
It's tuning fork. I mean, all we're trying to do is move air on the speaker. It's like a speaker, a drum head. It has to move air, and that's the frequency. Well, the drum shell has got a tone anyway, if you just tap the shell without any skins on it. So it's going to be a certain sweet spot for tuning.
Sure.
I tuned quite high to quite low. A lot of drummers I see when we've had support bands, or I'm supporting a band, and I tap their drums, I'm always amazed how low they tune. And then when I go and hear them, I can't hear them. Because they sound great in the room. They sound fantastic in a drum shop with loads of cymbals resonating. But when you get out and you've got to battle against guitars, you don't hear them.
Just get lost.
They sound great close up. They sound great mic'd up in the studio. But live, you don't hear them very well, in my opinion. And you get more bounce the tighter you go. So I tune pretty high to low. So, I've always said that if you're in a fire and you had to shout, help, there's a fire, you wouldn't go, help. You go, help! Why the barley's cut? Because they're tuned high.
Yeah.
So high to low. So the lower stuff you need, you're going to need help on that. So I'll tune like dum 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 boom boom boom, really high to low. So you get any drum fill, you get a good. It doesn't actually sound like that when you actually play, but they're a lot higher than you realise. If you tap my drums, they're quite high. And often when you do the single drum. When you do a sound check, hit rack one, they go, doom, doom. They go, oh, that sounds strange. So no, put it in context and add guitar. It sounds great. It's funny when you hear things separately, and you've got to be careful when you tune that it sounds great directly in front of you.
Yes. But
if you add all these frequencies, it gets lost. So for me, no dampening, as in no suspension stuff, because, again, if I may waffle, you want to move that fork. My theory is, if you bang a tuning fork, you don't put it on a cushion to hear it. You put it on something solid so that it vibrates. And I find that the drum kit sounds much, much better if you have none of that suspension stuff on it. Personally, there's less to faff around when you change heads, all those hoops, all that stuff. It weighs less in the case. It's cleaner. That's how I feel. So I'll get my drums.
Do you know, everything you've talked about so far has given you a very unique thumbprint when you play. You're playing. I think there's not many people who I could listen to a record and go, I know that is, but you're one of them. You've got a very unique thumbprint, and that's it. I can only be a great thing.
Yeah, I'd always wanted that. I didn't know I would get one. I don't even know I've got one. I mean, I'm told I have, and I think it's because I wasn't taught. And I think I found my own way, and I have a kind of, I didn't want to play out and out rock. I wanted to play slightly fusiony, but I was playing rock, so I added stuff. Yeah. If I am playing fusion or jazz, I'd play it in a rocky way. I'd always want to try and, I really love grace notes. I like hearing the stuff that people try and iron out at gigs, which I call the vibe sponge. People put gates on my drums. I mean, the gig's over for me if I know it's. I mean, I'll still play okay, but I'm doing this delicate stuff, and all you're hearing is duff bang, duff bang. So I don't mind it in the studio for a reason. I don't mind it if there's a drum feeding back and you can work with it. But gates and all that. I mean,
gates equals lazy sound engineer to me.
We don't carry our own, and I say, look, I can't go in and say that, but I say, look, can you work with me? If you put gates on, tell me what they're on, and I'd rather tune them out or dampen them out, so that playing that, it's all those nuances, it's that stuff. I call it, if you do that and you hear that in your ears, it's that stuff, and even the rattling of the snare drum when you hit the kick drum, I like, because if you hit your kick drum and your snare's off, the kick drum doesn't sound right. So all those things I like in the drums, it's all part of the machine. If the machine has a squeak, let it squeak. It's part of the groove. So I'm a big fan of letting the grace notes and the snare, letting the rests happen on the snare and put that in the track. You hear it if you listen to it, particularly hi-hat stuff. Most people don't have the hi-hat sound right on records. It's lost. It's in the same frequency. My big enemy with recording and getting what I think is a great drum sound is acoustic guitar. As soon as you have acoustic guitar, it's right in your frequency of your hi-hat. All that zing, 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 zing from the strings with a nail and then is exactly into your hi-hat playing. Yeah. You've got to be very careful hearing the hats with that stuff. I mean, obviously I like the acoustic guitar, but I want to try and get my hi-hat slightly out of their frequency because I think the hi-hat, even tapping on the hi-hats on the backbeat and accents on the hi-hat, give it the movement, give it that forward motion, which I'm really careful about, that top endy stuff, which is why I like the splashes and having detailed hi-hat work, which I love putting good hi-hat work into drumming, which gives it that, I guess, my sound. I don't know.
Well, the first song I ever heard you play on was Chance. So, and there's some beautiful, delicate, exquisite hi-hat playing in that.
Yeah. I mean, the song didn't probably need it. I don't know what it needs, but when it's a blank canvas and you can paint what the hell you like, and to a certain degree, unless you're told not to. I was very lucky as well because it was such an original sounding band. I could be as original as I wanted. So I had I wasn't coming into a genre where it was like, I'm expected to sound like this and therefore we'll make your drums sound like that, just like the other people do. I was able just to be myself, and particularly working with Chris Thomas and Steve Lillywhite, who really liked my playing, and I loved their production. They were very encouraging to say, and they even say to me, "We can hear your grace notes. Do you want that in?" I go, "Yes, leave it in." Well, it's sounding great out here. It's giving it a groove. So, and Steve Lillywhite was really, really keen to sort of challenge me as well. He would say, "Right, you can play those drum parts on your toms and on your snare because I can play them all, but can you separate some of them for production?" So I have to work out what to leave out, like on a few little drum fills on the early stuff. But Steve used to challenge me, and I loved him for that. And he was a great guy with me with drums. He got me a huge big drum sound at Rack Studios, where he wasn't literally doing that gated sound. It was using the room mics that were further away and mixing them in with the drums and then compressing them. Yeah. And I love that sound like Phil Collins used to get as well. Big fan of Nik Kershaw as well, with his little splashes and his hi-hat work. And his lovely tom sound as well. I love that about drums, where I can hear everything. It's lost in a lot of music these days because they're so low in the mix unless it's a drum machine. Yeah. Or the samples, I can't tell if it's sampled or the drum parts are kind of mundane. But I don't really get fired up about a lot of new stuff because the drumming's not that great.
Yes, yeah, it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs, isn't it?
Drummers around because there's a lot of good talk drummers, but I think they get tied into playing stereotypical rhythms, and I always try and think of what can I put into the song rhythmically that's will make it interesting. I always made a point of that. If I could get away with it. I remember Stuart Adams was saying to me, "Mark, what are you doing? Just bang the drums. Why have you got drum part 3, drum part 4 in one song?" Well, because I'm kind of orchestrating my drum parts, and so sometimes I would play really solid. I would play like John Bonham would. I would just slam it down as a rock thing. When I did the album with the Cult, I thought, well, I love the music. It's rock guitars, but it's got that kind of gothic thing. So I thought, well, I'd get a little bit of that kind of basic John Bonham kind of thing in, but also do the XTC thing with making plans Nigel sing as well. Get that kind of
big
envelope.
Neon glitter. Wow.
So 2 bars as well, 2-bar drum groove. Over 2 bars again. I think so. Yeah, there's a few 2-bar drum grooves on that.
Great album.
Yeah, I remember. There was a track called The Phoenix, and I was always bemused by the 70s disco drumming, which I absolutely adore because I love ABBA's music and I love the musicianship in ABBA. I even like some. I was slated for saying it once. Graham Broad is a good friend of mine, a drummer.
Graham's been on the show as well.
great drummer, and he played a lot on the Bucks Fizz stuff. And so there's some great drum parts. Don't go, oh, it's Bucks Fizz, and then you get demonized. Listen to the drums in Land of Make Believe. It's fantastic. It's a really great drum part, and Graham's a great drummer for playing that kind of stuff. So, yeah, sorry, I forgot what I was saying. I waffled.
Oh, no, we were just talking. Well, I mentioned Big Neon Glitter, and it's just...
Yeah, I was amazed when the 70s, when punk killed disco. I still like disco because I love that. I love the hi-hat doing that, and the 16ths, and I love the 4 to the floor. I like that. Sometimes, if it wasn't 4 to the floor, it's just kick, snare, kick, snare. There was one point where there were songs that the snare drum, I couldn't tell if it was the bass drum or the snare or the bass drum. They sounded almost the same. It was almost. There's only a slight different EQ for the snare. So when I think it was the track that goes, excuse me, doing the voice thing, but it's the way I can explain things. Dum dum ba dum ba dum dum da da dum da da dum ba dum dum da da dum on the Phoenix.
Yeah.
I thought, well, the kick drum I could replace with the snare. I was thinking that what they would do back in the day. I thought, well, the snare sound, I could make the snare where the kick is. So instead of going boom, jack, boom, ba boom, bat, dum, that, dum, ba dum, that, which I end up doing, I thought, wow, I'll give it a go at the intro. I did snare, bass, snare, dum, ba dum, snare. I thought I'd swap it around because similar sounding tone. So see if anyone notices. It's funny what I did. And Steve Brown noticed, the producer, who was a friend of Steve Levi's, and he said, "Hey, Mark," he said, "you're playing backwards at the front, aren't you? I like that." And when Billy heard that, he went, "That's great, man. Yeah, let's keep that." And I turned it around for when the vocals come in. So I'm trying to, bring something that could be quite simple. Simple's good as well, because I like drumming as well. Great groove player, bless him, and a great drum sound. But I do like to try and make it different. And I guess in doing so, it's given me my own sort of thing. And the way I think it's all in the way you play, your fingers, and the tuning is, I don't know if I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just the way I'm, like every drummer, there's no real rules. You end up defaulting to be yourself,
Yeah, and I think, when somebody books you, they know exactly what they're going to get. They can't say, oh, well, can we just have it like 4 on the floor with no fun?
Because I still do a lot of session work. I'm out in Nashville every few months working out there. And I'm very sympathetic to what I think they would want to hear. There is an element of that, first of all, is that genre. But then after chatting to the bass player or the songwriter, I say, I've got an idea, would you be, can I try this out? And if they say yes, then I go, right, I'm going to try and do it, I do a polyrhythm against something in 6/8 for no reason at all, other than the fact that I think it's cool to do, and if I can get away with it, then I will. But then again, I love the drummers like Simon Phillips, who uses all his toms very musically. And there's always something interesting to hear in anything he plays. And I try and hopefully put stuff in things that I do, if I can, to make the song more interesting, because anything that stands out that's different to me is going to be original, and original makes it unique. Yeah. And hopefully that's what people want but I do get asked to play in a certain way. But sometimes when I've gone in there, I may say, and they say, I'm making my own judgment, and I think I'll play pretty straight, thinking that's what everyone wants. They say, well, hey, we've booked you, Mark, do your thing. So I go, oh, okay. I try and think what that is, but I do.
But that is your whole, that's your DNA. That's what you are, isn't it? You
said you saw me at the trade show. Somebody came up to me and said, I really like your playing, Mark, which is really lovely to hear. And he said, how did you get away with it all?
That's a good question.
I think if you do it convincingly and you make it sound good, you can open up those new areas that you don't normally. I think that if you listen to Stuart Copeland, he played so differently to music, and his signature's right there. I love drummers like that you can immediately hear who they are. They have their own snare sound, they have their own way of where the downbeat thing he had, and the octabands, and I can hear. Back in the day, I could tell if it was John Bonham, I could tell if it was Keith Moon, I could tell if it was Phil Collins. I could tell if it was, Buddy Rich. You could Ian Pace. I can hear their style. Stuart Copeland, Manu Katché, instant styles, and I always wanted to be one of those. I don't hear that so often these days because I don't know what it is. I don't know if they're allowed to get away with it in the studio like I am or I was. I don't know. Times are different, or whether they're. I don't know if it's because they're taught and they're obeying all the rules, whatever those rules are. Because there's no rules in drumming for me. You can kick something over and it's got rhythm. You can repeat that.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. There are some great drummers around. Don't get me wrong, some fabulous players, but I don't get to hear somebody where I go, I know that guy's style, and maybe I'm not listening to the right music, but I don't hear it in everyday music like I.
No. And I think, how did you get away with it? The thing is with yourself, however complicated it was, it always sounded comfortable. It was never awkward or lumpy. It sat nicely with everything else.
I think the master, if you listen to prog rock, the drummers that play great in that style are the guys that can make odd time signatures seem comfortable. The fluidity is there. I mean, particularly Phil Collins with odd time signatures. He just does a little flick on the bell, and or Simon Phillips. It's just that. It's like you said. It's making it feel comfortable. I don't want to distract from the song. I'm not doing a solo drum solo.
Yeah.
I tend to avoid those because it's a whole different area that is for me. I can do them, but I've never really been asked to do them. But I play for the song. So I can play simple. It's all about the song. And as much as we talked about me I don't want to be bulldozing over anyone's song, but if they want me to bring something to it, I've got plenty of that to bring. And I like to try and do that. But I also have to consider the song. The song's very important because sometimes I think it's a strange thing being asked to play. Songwriters, they're their own breed. It's very personal writing a song. It's very personal singing those lyrics. They start off on acoustic guitar, whatever. It's a very personal statement. Then they come and ask you to bash something over it, which, I'm the only one bashing. When you look at bands and music, there's lots of instrumentation, but there's only one drummer.
Yeah.
So I've got to really respect that. I have to really respect my position as well. I certainly do. And I don't, as much as it's great what you say about my style, and I'm pleased to hear that because I've always wanted that. It's really important that I really do the song justice as well, I've just done an album with a guy called J.J. Gilmore, who was in the Silencers. He was in a band called the Casbah Club with me a while back. And we've got a lovely drum sound with a studio in Glasgow, and it's very simple, beautiful songwriting, kind of crowded house kind of thing. But I've still made the drumming very traditional, beautiful drum sound, but it's still made it interesting without tearing the song up. I've done over the bar fills, double length fills where you'd expect I carry on and stuff like that. That I thought, because it happened when I was doing the pass, so I play in that style. So. But when I hear it back, I thought, I've been very sympathetic to the songs there, but I've also made the drumming still interesting,
I think that's the ultimate, I think, if you can do that. You've got everything's covered, there's no, it's all there.
Yeah, and I'm very blessed, Matty, with my session work because as well as Big Country, I've played on a lot of other people's records. But I go into a different drum room and my drums sound completely different to me, but they still sound like me.
Yeah,
because the accents and the approach, So yeah, I'm aware of that, and I'm pretty chuffed when that gets noticed. So
there's an album that maybe a few people won't be familiar with, but I'm a fan of his anyway, and that's Fish. I loved early Marillion with Fish, and the Vigil album you did, which was it? Oh, I'm guessing very late 80s, Mark.
92, I think that was. Yeah.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
You must have enjoyed that.
Yeah, I did enjoy that. I mean, I did a second album called Field of Crows with Fish as well later on, which that's a really great record as well. I did enjoy that because Fish had that kind of Phil Collins, Gabriel-y voice.
Yeah.
obviously had his own thing, which he's a fantastic musician and a lovely guy. But I loved it when there was things not in 4/4, because I could dive into what I used to, I was in a prog rock band, as I said, with Tony Butler and Simon Townshend before, and I learnt to play not in fours. We had nothing in 4/4 almost at that time, but so I tapped back into that, and we had Nicky Simmons on keyboards. Great playing. I think we had Robin Bolt on guitar. My brother played bass on that tour, actually.
Ah, okay.
He played with Nik Kershaw with me, my brother Steve, with Midger as well, Steve, stuff like that. He's a brilliant bass player. So, yeah, we used to be called the Flying Brzezicki Brothers. But, yeah, fantastic. He was, again, very affable. If you played great drums, he would like it.
Yeah.
And we were down at, where was it, in studio in, it's now flat, sadly, Townhouse 3 in the Goldhawk Road that was a great studio. But yeah, I enjoyed that. I liked my drum sound on that. I could stretch out differently to what I do in Big Country. That was my Big Country head then. I was in my Fish prog rock head on that one.
Yeah.
I enjoy the challenge of that stuff. I really do like that kind of music.
I remember hearing the song Big Wedge, and that's just got your DNA stamped all over it.
Yeah. It's the big brass stabs as well as a big snare sound and stuff. So if I dare say a little bit in the Phil Collins approach, which was happening at that time, I don't try and be like that. It's just the way I grew up listening to Genesis and Phil with Brand X. That kind of style, especially his some of his tom fills and his grace notes that Phil does, I absolutely adore. I did my own album actually with a guy called Tony Lowe. It was a project between me and him called ESP, which they're still gigging now as ESP, where I sang a couple of songs, and it was a very proggy album. It's called ESP Invisible Din. It's a really good record for scratching. It's kind of my version of Brand X, but within another band, where there was singing, but it was kind of Brand X with vocals.
Okay, different.
But yeah. I enjoyed the Fish live and in the studio. It was very enjoyable to play that stuff, using the big kit again, all those big bills and stuff.
I mean, and you mentioned Nik Kershaw. Now, what I genuinely believe Nik Kershaw is an absolute genius. I really do. Yeah. What did you do with Nik then? Because I know he's used so many drummers over the years.
Yeah, I did an album called Radio Musicola with him, my brother playing bass.
Wow.
And
that was the album. That was the album, the big album.
I don't know which one it was, but if it's big, or I do these albums and I don't know what happens to them. But yeah, the Radio Musicola album, Simon Phillips is on a couple of tracks as well, so I was in good company. My brother's on bass with me on that. And I've got to say that Nik he's a genius songwriter. He's incredible at giving you an amazing verse, but the killer chorus. Musical change that he does with his chords. He's absolutely brilliant songwriter. And he's also a bit of a taskmaster, because out of all the people I played with from Pete Townshend onwards, I mean, Pete was a taskmaster as well, because he likes you to bring stuff to the table. Nik was always like, well, let's do it again. Oh, right, well, I tried double hi-hats on this one. Oh, great idea. How's that going to sound? So I showed him that. I'll use the drum. Maybe he said, have you hit these yet? And I go, no, but I could incorporate those. So he loved the fact I had quite a large drum kit, from the octave to the gong drum. And he's really into the drums. He would sit on the kit with me and say, wow, that sounds great. Can you get that in somehow? So, yeah, he was a joy to work with, because I could use the whole kit.
Wow.
And he encouraged me to, we would do 2 or 3 takes, and they were good takes. And he would say, right, now you've done that, give me a completely different approach. How would you do it if you played in, and brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Having
unusual.
That, he was really good. Pete Townshend's been the same as well. Where he gives me these songs that aren't completely set in stone. There's room for movement. Some of them, particularly on psychedelics, because I think I've done 7 albums with Pete. He was playing some old Who backing tracks, the Won't Get Fooled Again tracks, with not much music, and they were just changing at random, that kind of double ba dee dee doo doo doo. But that pulse was a rhythm, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
he said, well, play along to that and try and construct different areas of things. So he gave me a lot of freedom on that record, which was an interesting way to work, as well as songs that were more structured. And he's a great guy to work with. He's the one, he would push me as well. I mean, I tell a story on one of those songs, Matty, where he said to me, Pete Townshend said, a bit like You Can See Me, he put a big TV monitor in front of me because the control room was in another room. And he said to me, on this track, you haven't learnt the song. I want you to go pretty naive with it. I don't want you to learn it too much. Because I want things to happen. You know, sometimes learning songs, you get set in your ways. He wanted the experimental stuff where I'm trying stuff out, which is great to be in that position. And he said to me, don't stop drumming until I stop you. So even if whatever happens, do not stop. You'll know when to stop. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm not going to tell you anymore. Just going to send you the track and stand by, basically. So I started playing to this track that was, lots of it was the Won't Get Fooled Again kind of backing track. And I'm playing along and we're onto this section now and got into a good groove here. Not sure where it's going to go next, but I'm counting bars to square it out. This section now, I hope you're going to like this. And I'm not actually thinking that. I'm just kind of lost in that space, as you call it, the zone. And in the corner of my eye, Pete Townshend's creeping into the drum room, where it's in the big room. And he comes kind of creeping in. He's going, shh. He's going, carry on playing. And now he's taking my drums away. Whilst he takes my floor tom away. Then he removes my hi-hat whilst I'm drumming. Then he removes my cymbals. And then he moves my bass drum. And then I'm standing up now. And that was the take. You know,
wow!
I wanted to see what I would do and how I would play if he took things away, and see what would happen within the drum track. So,
I love that.
Yeah, so you know, incredibly innovative guy to work with. Pete still is. You know, he's a fantastic writer and he's a joy to work with. I love working.
Do you know, I'd like just to go back to Nik Kershaw just for a second, because it's jogged my memory of something. You mentioned the double hi-hats on one of the tunes. Now, I had on as a guest about 2 months ago, Mark Price, who did all Nik's live stuff.
Oh, right. He's a lovely drummer, yeah.
Yeah, and he was he was saying, you know, he was hoping he'd be on the records, but wasn't because of various producers and what have you. You know, very honest about it. But he said the nightmares he had trying to play the parts that you and Simon had put on with double hi-hats. He's like, oh God.
He's a very good drummer himself. I like his playing.
Yeah.
I don't mean to do anything like that. It was just the way the chemistry was working with Nik, because he was very much into, you know, exploring what I can do to the songs and leaving me pretty open, you know. Obviously, again, I have to adhere to the groove of the song to, you know, play the song and be mindful of that. But the double hi-hat thing, yeah, I always played two hats. Long before it became kind of, you see it more often now. I was putting stuff, my theory was, if my hand goes there, I could have something there, like a second snare on the left, sometimes a second floor tom on the left, because it gives you the and one, you know, easier than the other way. So trying to make it easier for yourself, particularly when you're creating patterns on the drums, you know, having those drums. And so the second hi-hat was really, I just launched into it in some kind of middle eight. I think it was on a track called Life's a Bitch and Then You Die, LAB, whatever the abbreviation is.
Yeah.
Or was it James Cagney? I can't remember. Yeah, and that was great because we stereoed the hats, which sounded pretty crazy in the headphones, but very interesting, you know. I also did something for Midge, because he was also very innovative, because I play on a lot of Midge's solo stuff. And I came up with this idea of, because we had lovely wooden floor in the studio, which is getting my big crash cymbal and miking the floor up with two stereo mics and spinning the cymbal like you see if you spin a penny on the table.
Yeah,
it spins and it goes and I did that on a few tracks where and you can control it by pressing the middle of the cymbal to when it lands, and it goes, you know. And so when you hear that, it sounds like kind of a strange stereo helicopter, which is a cymbal spinning. So I've got stuff like that. These little production things that they allowed me to try out. The other thing I tried out with both, I worked with Frida from ABBA on a solo record as well. But on the Cult album, on a track called Brother Wolf, Sister Moon, I had this idea. I didn't have my gong drum, but I wanted something to sound kind of, I don't know, before the song started, there was this vocals and guitar picking, but I wanted to have this kind of deep boof, boof, before the song comes in. And I thought, I looked at my beater, I had a beater in my stick bag, and I went to the front of my drum head, and I went right up close to it, and I tapped it, you know, I held my breath, and I tapped it as quiet as I could. I'm talking about that amount.
Yeah.
And it sounded incredible. Just tapping it tiny. And I said to Steve, I've got an idea. I don't know if it's going to work. Mic up the kick drum, turn it right up. But I'm going to, I gagged myself, I wore a bandana at the time. I won't breathe. I don't want to hear my body creak. And in time, the track was quite hard to do that quiet. As the track was playing, I had it turned right down because the headphones would bleed. I tapped the drum as quietly as I could. And it sounded enormous in the studio. So in the front of that, before I come in with the main drum track, that's what the boom.
Really?
Yeah, it's the drum head being tapped. I'm talking about, you can see it here.
Yeah.
That it's so small, it sounds massive. So I used that on the track. It worked out great. And the other one on the Cult thing, I got out 2 coins. I tried this on a track called Hollow Man.
Mm-hmm.
It boom, 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 boom. Then the snare comes in. Dum, ba, da, da, dum, bum. It's the first hit of the snare. I wanted it to explode. I thought, I wonder if I could use that close mic again. So I got 10p coin balanced on my finger and another 10p coin. I did the same trick. I mic'd up the 10p coin and I just tapped it together. It sounded incredible in the room.
Really?
It goes bing, yeah, like it's a crouton, whatever you call it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 2 10p's just being tapped on the first snare hit of Hollow Man. So I got into those sort of trick. Sorry, I'm digressing with drums here, but
that's what we're here for.
Kind of what, you know, you can sample that stuff now, but I'm going back in the day, we're in the 80s here, and I had great fun with, you know, when I come into Brother Wolf, Sister Moon on that track, if you listen to it, it goes on my tom-toms, boom, 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 that. But I had one of these, and I used the chain over the cymbal. I just struck the chain across it, you know, to give it things like that. I love all those old school things, but I kind of made up a few things as well for 10p coin.
I love hearing stuff like this. You know, you wouldn't know this if
No.
the things, the conversations like this, they'd be lost to history.
What a track with Big Country when you get a moment called Tall Ships Go, because the drumming's pretty bonkers on that. I got away with Murder on that, but it's a great drum track. It's relentlessly busy drumming and some interesting stuff on there. But we recorded that record in Polish studios, ABBA studios in Stockholm. And I already came up with this idea because it's quite a new song and the drum part hadn't been kind of worked in. But it's all around an echo. I love working with this kind of delay stuff. We can get really busy. You know, you hit the guitar once, it goes bit like the U2 thing, but we gave it to them. So the Edge says that Stuart gave it to them. Anyway, I came up with this idea on the octabounds and the hi-hat pattern. Pretty simple, 16ths. But I didn't have my second snare for some reason. It wasn't in the studio because I'd just done another track where I wasn't using it. But there was, I don't smoke, but back in the day, people smoked in studios. And there was an ashtray. It looked like an octabound with an aluminium top, a square.
I know what you mean.
So I looked at it and I thought, I tapped it and it made a fantastic sound because the aluminium square bit where you put your cigarette lifted up slightly against the metal frame and went and kind of shut down itself. So I hit that and thought, I said, Steve, I've got an idea. Mic the ashtray up. And he went, where are we going with this? I said, I don't know. Let's try it out. I don't know. It sounds good in the room. So I play 16ths and then slow down. That gang sped up at this speed. It's the ashtray going. It sounds like a hi-hat, but slightly metallic.
Wow.
It's the ashtray on that track, which is really clear in the mix. Yeah.
Oh, dear me.
Inventive, you know.
Look, Mark, this has been incredible. You've been on my list for so long, and now I feel totally justified that the absolute gold you've given me for the last hour. You know, thank you. That's all I can say.
I do admit I do waffle a bit. I mean, I only get asked one question. I waffle too much because I'm very enthusiastic. So apologies for that.
Never. Do you know what? As long as you're waffling about drums and your career, I don't care. That's fine. I'm all right with that.
It's been great talking to you. So thank you for letting me waffle.
Well, I really appreciate it. I know you're busy. I know you've been in Nashville and Scotland and gigging and doing different bits and pieces. So it's appreciated.
No, thank you very much, and I'm honoured to be on your channel. Thank you for having me.
Thank you,
great.
Mark. See you next time.
Yes, thank you.
Bye bye.